Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar program with Restoration Through Hellgate to the Promised Land, which will be performed by Norwegian storyteller Anna Elizabeth Skogen, live from Sand, Norway. My name is Chris Johnson, and I am the president and CEO of Vesterheim, the National Norwegian American Museum and Folk Art School, which is located in Decorah, Iowa. I'm here in the gathering room on Vesterheim's campus, and I hope you are safe and well, wherever it is that you are tuning in from. Now, before we get started, I'd like to just take a minute to go over some information about how you can use Zoom today. For this program, you will not appear on the screen and your microphone will be muted. We welcome you to use the chat function to interact with each other and with the panelists. The chat function usually appears at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to introduce yourself and share where you're from. If you want your message to show up for everyone attending today, send your message to panelists and attendees. Now, if you're having any technical difficulties with the viewing of the program today, you can send your messages directly to the Vesterheim staff panelists by choosing the panelists option in the chat box, and we will do what we can to help. We are recording today's event, and you will receive a post-event email tomorrow with a link to the recording. Now, that being said, because this is a live event, sometimes unexpected things that are out of our control can happen, such as the internet cutting out or lagging a video, and we hope you understand that we're trying to do our very best. You should see view options at the top of your screen. Click there and select side-by-side speaker view, and that should give you the best viewing experience. Now, after the main performance, there will be a brief talk back led by my co-host, Kirk Meese. So on behalf of the Vesterheim Board of Trustees and its staff, I would like to welcome you to this event today. Kirk Meese is my co-host today, and he is the Vice President of the Sloop Society of America, whose membership is made up of the descendants of the first Norwegians who sailed on the sloop Restauration from Norway to the United States, way back in 1825. Kirk also serves on the Vesterheim Board of Trustees. I want to thank Kirk for assisting with the planning for this program, and you'll be hearing more from him in just a few minutes. I also want to mention that the Riflike Museum in Sand, Norway is here with us today, and this is where our storyteller, Anna Elizabeth Skogen, will be performing from. So we are always really glad to have the opportunity to collaborate with museums in Norway. So hello to our friends in Norway. Next, I'd like to share a brief update with everyone today about some exciting physical changes happening here on Vesterheim's campus. Our Board of Trustees is committed to Vesterheim's mission and future, and is proposing an inspiring vision to make the museum a leading cultural destination here in the United States. We have partnered with the world-renowned architectural firm Snohetta to create a vibrant, cohesive, and inviting master plan to help reshape Vesterheim's campus. This will better meet the needs of our institution and audiences and create an impactful experience for all of our guests. This vision for the future is being realized through phased projects, the first of which is Vesterheim Heritage Park. This project is nearly complete, and the redesign of our outdoor division is a gateway to the entire downtown Decorah corridor, and will showcase the museum's unique historical buildings with a fully accessible landscape park that will include gentle glades and a community amphitheater. I want to take a moment to thank our partners who are helping to make Heritage Park possible, especially the Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies. They were a lead donor of this project, and it wouldn't be possible without their generous support. I have some photos to share with you about how the recent project progress has been going at Heritage Park. Here you can see the beautiful stone amphitheater that's located toward the east side of Heritage Park. In slide 2, you can see the new pathway system of Heritage Park, and this is currently in the process of being installed. The pathway in these photographs round the Tassa drying shed and are also heading between the Stabur and the schoolhouse. These paths are made out of finely compacted aggregate, and then they're edged with concrete. So it creates a nice soft look for our pathway system. Here in this next picture, you can see the timber frame shelter that has been installed near the Painter Burnett's mill. This shows it as it's being constructed before the roof was added and then later as the roof has been installed. The shelter sits next to a courtyard featuring a permeable paver system that was made possible by a Water Quality Initiative grant from the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. In this project, there are 112 trees on site, and there's a total of 19 different varieties of trees, but not all of them are quite in the ground yet. There are approximately 80 additional saplings to be planted, and so far we have planted white pine, Black Hills spruce, birch, and many other varieties, with more being planted in the very near future. Now, particularly relevant to today's presentation, in August, we started work on Restoration Plaza. This courtyard features pavers that are shaped in the outline of the sloop restoration, with 2 sails hanging above the appropriate height and suspended from the museum building. This focal point of Heritage Park pays homage to the original restoration that arrived at New York Harbor nearly 200 years ago. Now, if you want to keep up on the work at Heritage Park, you can follow live updates about its progress every Thursday on our Facebook page. These updates are led by Vesterheim Registrar and Youth Educator Jennifer Kavarik, and we're looking forward to holding a dedication event for Heritage Park in 2021. If you've never been to Vesterheim in person, we hope that you'll be able to come and experience Vesterheim in the very near future. In addition to an in-person visit, there are many ways to stay connected. We offer all types of things on our website and social media. On those places, you can find videos, expanded virtual galleries, exhibits, engaging stories, online classes, online shopping, and a blog, just to name a few things. The website is frequently updated, so visit the website often. One of the best ways to stay in touch is through Vesterheim magazine, sent to museum members twice a year. This popular benefit is filled with in-depth stories, beautiful photographs, and updated information on museum exhibits, classes, and other activities. The work we do here at Vesterheim happens because of people like you. People like you who support our mission and participate in our programming. So please know how grateful we are for your support this year more than ever. So thank you. Now next, I'd like to introduce Vesterheim trustee Kirk Meese, who serves as the president for the Slooper Society of America. So over to you, Kirk.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the Slooper Society of America, I'd like to welcome you to today's event, and I especially want to thank Vesterheim for making today's event possible. The first organized group of Norwegian immigrants to America departed Stavanger on July 4th, 1825, on a sloop-rigged ship named Restoration. The ship was only 54 feet long and departed with 52 people aboard. And after a voyage across the Atlantic that lasted 98 days, 53 people, yes, a child was born during the voyage, arrived safely in New York Harbor on October 9th. And today, these first courageous Norwegian immigrants are remembered as sloopers. and their ship Restoration is often referred to as the Norwegian Mayflower. And in great part due to their courage, back in 1825, nearly 800,000 Norwegians would follow in their footsteps for a new life in America in the next 100 years. And so I would imagine that most everyone in attendance today has some sort of personal connection to the story of the sloopers. The Norwegian Slooper Society of America was formed during the 1925 centennial celebration in Ottawa, Illinois. The Slooper Society continues to meet annually at the Norway Community Center in Norway, Illinois, on the Sunday nearest October 9th. I'm very excited for today's event, and I think it's quite special and in keeping with the spirit of the original sloopers who never lost their heart for Norway, that we have in attendance today, many from both America and Norway. In fact, I first met Anna Elizabeth Skogen during a visit with my family to Norway in 2017. And we met again the following summer in beautiful Decorah, Iowa, home of Vesterheim, during Nordic Fest. And this is where I first heard Anna Elizabeth present the story we will hear today. Anna Elizabeth is a very gifted writer and storyteller, and I know you will enjoy her presentation. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Anna Elizabeth Skogen. Thank you, Anna Elizabeth, for joining us today.
Hello from Norway. Hello from Ryfylke Museum. Ryfylke Museum is a museum for some of the municipalities northeast of Stavanger. And the administration center is here on Sand, where I'm now. I'm very grateful to be asked to tell the story of the first Norwegian immigrants to America that sailed from Norway over the Atlantic Ocean and through the Hell Gate to the land of freedom. Through my work with this story, I've learned that different families have different tradition of what happened on board. And sometimes I have had to choose version because my task has been to make a continuous story of 50 minutes, understandable for everyone. So now you will get my version of the story. Just one thing more. I have to ask you, please listen to my story by your heart, not to my English language. It was a sunny and windy day in July in the year 1825. In the harbor of Stavanger, a 54 feet long sailing ship was moored at one of the piers, and there were a lot of people on board. They were packed together up on the deck, men and women, young people and children. And they were all ready to leave Norway and cross the vast Atlantic Ocean to America. Soon they would wave goodbye to friends and family at the pier. Forever. Who were these people and why did they leave their homes? The leader of the group was a man named Lars Geilane. Lars Geilane was born and grew up on a small farm close to the city of Stavanger. When he was a boy, his father died and he had to help his mother to run the small farm. But often he was down at the port and looked at different sailing ships that came from different countries. And the boy had a dream, wants to be a sailor himself. And when Lars Geilane was about 20, he got hired on a boat bound for Spain. That was in the year 1807. And in 1807, the Napoleonic Wars were in progress in Europe. And when Lars Geilane and the crew sailed through the English Channel, the boat was taken under arrest and the crew put in the English prison. That means they come on board one of the prisoners' ship, and there were very bad condition on board. But after a time, they got visit of people that handed out food, gave them religious books to read, and told them about their faith. These people later were called Quakers, and one of them was William Allen. After 7 long years in the prison, when the Napoleonic Wars finally ended in 1814, Lars-Kjellane had converted to the Quakers. And when the other prisoners went home, Lars-Kjellane went to London and stayed there for a time to learn more English and more about the Quakers. And he stayed at home by William Allen's mother, Margaret Allen. But after a time, he went back home to Stavanger. And then he regularly gathered families and friends in a small farmhouse and told them about his faith. This meeting continued. And in August 1818, William Allen came to visit from London, and Lars-Kjellane invited to meeting day after day. And people came, not only from the area around Stavanger, they also came from islands and villages in the fjords. And not only adult people, young people came sailing as well. On one of the meetings in August 1818, the first Norwegian Quakers community was founded. The Quakers did not want to baptize their children in church. They did not want to marry in church, and they wanted to hold their own funerals. Not least, they refused military service. In Norway at that time, it was illegal not to follow the state church rituals. So when the Quakers in Stavanger did not baptize their children, did not marry in church, they were punished. Either they were put in jail or they had to pay fine. That got Lars-Kjellane to think about moving, perhaps back to England. But William Allen asked him, why not go further west? Why not go to America? In America, you also can have the faith you want. Moreover, the land is cheap and easy to farm. Lars-Kjellane liked this idea, and soon others in the Quakers community wanted to emigrate too. And they started to discuss how to prepare the emigration. Then they found they would ask a man to go to America and check out the conditions with his own eyes. And the man who were chosen for this voyage of discovery was a special man called Kleng Persson. Kleng Persson had sailed in foreign trade and could speak very good English, and he wanted to go to America. And in the year 1821, Kleng Persson and a young man from the community left for America. But they didn't come home the same year, and not the year after, and not the year after that. First in the year, in springtime 1824, Kleng Persson was back home, but then he could tell that William Allen was correct. There were religious freedom in America, the land was cheap and easy to farm. When others in this area got this to know, many wanted to join the Quakers and immigrate to America. Again, they started to discuss how to do it. And now they asked Kleng Persson again, this time to go ahead to America, to buy land and prepare the arrival of the rest of the group. Kleng Persson went to America the same year, 1824, in the fall. And at Christmas time, the deal was done, and Kleng Persson wrote a letter home, and it started like this. Dear father, brother, sister, and friends, I'm glad to tell you that I'm happy and well in America. We sailed for 6 weeks, and then we arrived in New York, where I found my friends with good health. Friends? Yes, he had Quaker friends from the last time he was over. And he told Whiter in the letter that the Quakers had helped him to buy land, and the land was located upstate New York by the shore of Lake Ontario in Kendall. There were a lot of woods, and he had already cut some trees, built a little house, and put in a stove. He hoped they could build more house when the other came over before the first winter came. In the letter, he also told that the Quakers in New York had advised the rest of the group to buy a boat themselves that was not too big and fill the bottom of it with iron as ballast. Iron was scarce in America at that time, and they could sell both the boat and the iron when they came over. So he ended his letter with telling them that he missed them all, and he longed for that moment when they would meet again in the harbor of New York. At home, Lars Geiland was in the process of planning the immigration on full time now. He had just, in Christmas time, 1824, married one of the young girls that had came to the meetings in 1818. They had known each other since. And now it was finally decided who really want to immigrate. And among the immigrants were several families with children in all ages, young unmarried men, and 15, 16 years old boys that would travel alone without their parents. Now, Lars Geiland also had to organize a purchase of a boat for the journey. He knew about a boat that was for sale south of Stavanger in the little town Egersund. The boat was named Restauration. It had sailed in cargo traffic along the coast, but was now rigged into a sloop and could sail faster. But first of all, he has to raise money for the cost of $1,800 for restoration. Most of the people, immigrants, didn't have much money, but one of them was prosperous. That was Johannes Steine. Johannes Steine, he sold his own cargo boat and paid $1,200 of the $1,800 of restoration. So he became the official owner of the boat. So Johannes Steine, the owner, and Lars Geiland went to Egersund early in May, bought the boat, sailed it back to Stavanger and moored at one of the piers. May and June became a busy time for Lars Geiland, that also was a ship carpenter. He and one of the young boys that should travel alone crafted bunks below deck. The bunks were narrow, short, and so low that a man barely could turn around. And children, they had to sleep in one bunk. Two of them had to sleep in one bunk, had 2 feet. Up on the deck, they made a galley, a small kitchen. They bought a stove with 4 legs and nailed all the 4 legs to the deck. So they built a box for firewood, nailed it to the deck, and a kitchen box and nailed it to the deck. At last, they built a water tank and nailed it to the deck. At the same time, the farmers at the countryside sold their farms. People in town sold their houses, and they had to sell everything they could not bring with to America. And the only thing a family could bring with to America had to get placed in a chest that was 5 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 2.5 feet high. That was for shoes, clothing, and other assets for the whole family for the rest of their life. The departure day approached. They were busy at the pier. The man bought iron from shipyards around the city, carried it on board, down the ladder, and placed it in the middle of the boat, as they had been advised to do. And soon came the families with their chests, carried it up on the deck, down the ladder, and placed them upon the iron, side by side, and upon each other. Over the chests, hooks were turned in the ceiling for hammocks. In that way, everybody got his own place to sleep. The last thing they brought on board was boxes of food: dry fish, dry bread, dry meat, peas, cheese, potato, and drink. They had liquor, beer, tea, some even brought coffee. And so, Monday, in the middle of the day, the 4th of July, 1825, everybody was on board. They were packed together, men, young people, women. Some of them were standing with children in their hands. Some had children on their arms. And one of the women was standing with a child in her womb. That was the young wife of Lars Gjelland, Martha Gjelland. Some of the families had older children at the pier, but not Johannes Steine, the owner of the boat. He had 2 children, Martha, 4 years old, and Sven, 16 years old. Martha were on board together with his mother and father, but Sven, he was not on board and not at the pier. He had disappeared some days earlier, and they couldn't find him anyway. They had looked for him all over Stavanger. At last, his father, Johannes Steine, had sailed into the fjord, and at home by his grandmother on the island Finnøy, he found his son by his grandmother. Sven wouldn't go to America. He had decided he would stay at home by his grandmother in Norway. His father tried to convince him to join the emigrants. His mother were waiting for him. His little sister were waiting for him. But Sven refused. He would stay at home. And his father had just one thing to do: say goodbye to his only son, 16 years old, well knowing they would never see each other again. On Restoration these days, some of the adult unmarried men had their financier at the pier, and the chef had his pregnant wife and 6 or 7 children at the pier. His thought was to get hired in New York and come back home, or to get his family over later on. That's another story what happened to him. But the time had come. They untied moorings and lifted their hands and started waving goodbye. All the people at the pier, there were a lot of people at the pier, they started to wave too, and some of them dried tears. But the people on board waved, and then everybody together started to sing hymns when they left harbor. A strong northerly wind were blowing into the fjord this day, and Restoration, with the flag hoisted and the sail hoisted, had to start crossing. And when they passed a little fortress out in the fjord, they were saluted. The journey had begun. At least they thought so. They didn't know what one of the young boys on board was thinking. Jens, 19 years old. Jens had both his father and mother on board. Also 3 younger sisters he had on board. But Jens himself had never liked the idea of going to America, but he hadn't told anyone about it. But now when he felt the waves, he became afraid and started to shout, "Let me go ashore. I won't go to America. I don't want to stay on board this little boat with all these people for many weeks and then come to America and stay there for the rest of their life. I'm 19 years old. I can take care of myself. Let me go ashore." Oh, the captain didn't know what to do with this young boy, but he could talk with the boy's parents. And after that, he decided to let Jens go ashore. And late in the afternoon, they sailed into a little harbor out by the coast, and Jens went ashore. When Restoration left the Norwegian coast, they were 52 people on board. The strong northerly wind remains the next few days when they crossed the North Sea towards the English Channel. After just 4.5 days, they sailed into the harbor of a small town in England, south. The plan was to refill water and buy a little fresh food. When the crew prepared water supply, some of the women went ashore to buy fresh food. They didn't brought money. They brought liquor. They wanted to trade. They would offer liquor for fresh food. When Lars Kjæland and the captain detected this, they became terrified. They called the women on board in a hurry and left harbor immediately. The women didn't know that it was strictly forbidden to trade liquor in English ports. If they had been detected, they could risk that both the captain and the crew were put in jail. So they didn't get time to refill water. But they had nice weather further south when they crossed the Bay of Biscay and when they proceeded along the coast of Portugal. Nice weather. They sailed for 3.5 weeks. Then they came closer up to the coast of North Africa. And then the captain knew there could be pirates in these waters. So everybody had to be aware and look around. Fortunately, no pirates appear. But another problem did appear. The water tank was empty and there were little food left. Oh, they became hungry, but most of all, thirsty. But these people did not complain loudly. They became apathetic, sitting on the deck, like dead in life. Then some of them, in my thought, it must be one of the young boys, but one of them saw a barrel floating in the sea, in the waves. Called Lars Kjæland, he looked at the barrel, and at last they managed to get the barrel up on the deck. It must have been laying in the sea for a long time. It was completely overgrown. But it turned out to be the most delicious Madeira wine. No, they had wine to drink. Oh, but the children and the young people, they decided everybody should get a little taste, just to be wet inside. The children get their taste and went down to the bunks. The young people, the women. At last, it was just the crew left on the deck. But they were so thirsty. Oh, they drank too much. And they fall asleep. And were lying like dead flies on the deck, sleeping like stones, and lost control of Restoration. Oh, that started to drift towards Funchal, the capital of Madeira. At the same time, some men were working at the fort down in the port. And they saw this sailing ship coming drifting towards harbor without the flag hoisted. Moreover, they couldn't see no one on board, no one who were working with the sail. What could that be? Perhaps a plague ship with only dead people on board? They shot warning shots, but no reaction out there. Then they directed the gun muzzles toward the ship. Fortunately, at that time, they were laying a ship from Bremen in Germany at anchor in the harbor. And the crew saw the danger, and they started to shout over to Restoration. Hoist flag! Hoist flag! You have to hoist flag! The sleeping man didn't hear anything. But one of the women under the deck come running up. Bertha was her name. Bertha from Tysvær. The flag? She didn't know where the flag was. Then she recognized the gun muzzles and understood what soon would happen. So she ran forward to the bow. Standing there, she tore off her skirt, and standing in bare legs, she started to wave intensely with her skirt. And they saw her. And Bertha and her skirt prevented the guns to start firing at the first Norwegian emigrant ship to America. Soon after, Portuguese custom collectors boarded the ship and thought that everything else was okay. Later, when Restoration came into harbor, they were met by the American consul on the island. When he had got to know that the passengers were immigrants from Norway, they should immigrate to America, he welcomed them hearty, all 52. And they got a meal they later never forget. This was the 1st of August. 1 month had passed since they left home. They stayed on Madeira for 6 days, and it was a pleasant stay. The children could run around, play, swimming, and for the adult too, not least Martha, that now was pregnant in her 8th month. It was nice to come ashore to feel the ground under her feet. They got a lot of food and a lot of drink by the American consul. And during these 6 days, they filled up the water tank, and they got on board a lot of food and grapes, so much they just wanted. And after 6 days, they were ready for the further travel. And now they were saluted from the harbor, from the fort. Good luck on the further journey. They sailed south in the direction of the Canary Island, and there they turned course westward and followed the trade wind. The wind came from behind, and Restoration plowed its way surely, slowly. And during the day, they could see just blue sea and blue sky. And during the night, they had the mighty dark sky above with all stars. There were a lot of good weathers the first part of the journey. One of the adult men had been a teacher before they left, and now and then he gathered the children and the young people and had lessons in the sun in the middle of the Atlantic. They also had meetings on board twice a week. Then they were sitting tied together under the big sails, praying, reading the Bible, singing, but most of all, they were sitting quiet together. But this trade wind could be really strong sometimes. It became storm, and the waves became high. And when the weather was like that, no one could be up on the deck. Everybody had to go under the deck. And when the weather lasts for days and they all had to stay under the deck. Oh, it wasn't easy. There were not much space, and the smell inside could be pretty bad. If they become sick, they had just to use buckets, the same buckets, all of them, 52. Oh, they were laying in the bunks, sometimes crying to God to lead them and save them across the ocean. But so the weather became better. When they had sailed for 4 weeks, they were 2 days' journey away from the Bahamas. Something specially happened on board. The women took control. Men and young people were driven up on the deck. Children all up on the deck, no one under the deck. And so the room under the deck were converted into a delivery room. The time had come for Marta Jäylane. Luckily, one of the women had been a midwife before they left. So with her help, Marta Jäylane gave birth to a healthy little girl it was. When the girl's father came down the ladder and saw that he had got a daughter, he was allowed to give her the name of the Quaker lady in London, Margaret Allen, both names. Margaret Allen was born the 2nd of September 1825. No, they were not 52, but 53 emigrants to America. From the Bahamas and further north to New York, they spent one more month on board. There were much bad weather at this last part of the journey. But no, they had come safely across the ocean. A new child was born. Now, the close relationship between the passengers started to give results. Young, pretty, I can see, Rachel, 18 years old. She must have looked around, and some man must have do that too, because she and the captain himself became a couple on board. And not only Rachel, that was sister of Jens that had went ashore outside Stavanger. Her younger sister, Guri, later called Julia, 15 years old, also found a lover, Gudmund Haukås, 10 years older than herself. But also their younger sister, Serena, learned to know one of the young boys that was travel alone, Jacob Slogvik. They did not become a couple on board, but they married 6 years later. Sailing up the east coast of America, they surprisingly turned around the eastern tip of Long Island and into Long Island Sound. Days, weeks, months had passed, the fall had come. And in the morning, Sunday, the 9th of October, Restoration reached Hell Gate. Hell Gate is the most dangerous place, the northern line to New York. It's a strait with a small strait, narrow strait, with islets and underwater rocks. And the tide flew with big speed through the strait. Many ships had wrecked there. But the crew on Restoration sailed the boat safely through Hell Gate and into East River. And in the morning, the 9th of October, 1825, Restoration proceeded down East River with Manhattan at the starboard side with farms and pastures, and Long Island at the port side. After a time, they could see south on Manhattan, the big city of New York coming up in the horizon, with higher houses than they had never seen, and with more than 100,000 inhabitants. And on the port side, they saw the little town of Broccoli. They sailed to the southern tip of Manhattan and moored at the piers of Borman and Johnson. The little boat Restoration from Norway on the big port of New York was noticed already the next day. A newspaper, New York Commercial Advertiser, could tell that a little boat had come all the way from Norway with Captain Helland. They had surprisingly come from Southbound along Long Island Sound and into New York, the Northern Line. There were a lot of people, young people, children, and 2 days later, another newspaper could tell more. That was New York Daily Advertiser. Under the heading, "A Novel Sight," they wrote that a little ship, like the ship they use as fishing boat along the coast. Yes, with that boat, a lot of people had come from Norway. Young people, children, grown-up people, adult people. And they had sailed for 14 weeks. They come from the area around Kapp Stavanger, Norway, they wrote. And I quote further from the newspaper. Wednesday, the 12th of October, 1825. The appearance of such a group of strangers coming from so a distant country in a vessel ill calculated for the voyage could not but make an unusual degree of interest. Those who come from the countryside are dressed in coarse clothes of domestic manufacture, quite different from the American. The article was much longer and it was reproduced in several newspapers, both in Philadelphia, Rochester, and Boston. When they finally came ashore, the immigrants were met by Cleng Persson. It became a hearty reunion. But not only Cleng Persson was waiting for the first Norwegian immigrants. A lot of Quakers were waiting for them too. And they invited them home to stay at home by the Quakers the first night. Martha Gjelane, Lars Gjelane, and the little girl, Margaret Allen, stayed at home by a lady called Lydia Glacier and her husband. And they became so good friends that when Lars Gjelane and Martha later got a little girl, they called her Lydia Glacier. It was good with this hearty welcome. Trouble soon should appear. And the first that happened was that Restoration was taken under arrest and the captain put in jail. What could that be? Hadn't they come to the land of freedom? According to a new American law of 1819, a ship on the size of Restoration could just have a third on the passengers on board. And for that, they got a fine of $3,000. Money they simply didn't have. They didn't have much money. The plan was to sell Restoration and the iron and got money for the further travel. What should they do? They had to come to Kendall and build more house before the winter came. But the first Norwegian immigrants to America had friends, the Quakers. And one of them gave them a loan of $600, and member of the community came with baskets of fruit, drink, and food for the further ride. And now they decided that Cleng Persson should lead them up to Kendall, while the owner of the ship, Johannes Steine, and the leader of the group, Lars Gjelane, should remain in New York together with the captain in jail. First of all, they had to carry their chests and other stuff down the gangway to the pier and up the gangway to a steamer that was at Battery Park. And everything was going well until this young Jacob Slogwick, as I told about, 18 years old. He came down the gangway with his precious carpenter's tools in his hands, tools he had got from his parents before he left. He went down the gangway, but then he stumbled and lost the tools in the sea. He lost what should be his help to start a new life in America. But the steamer took them up Hudson River, and it became a pleasant trip. The autumn sun was shining on the deck. It was warm and nice. And just after 1.5 days, they reached the city of Albany. And in Albany, they went ashore with their children on their arms, their chests, and other stuff. Now they should change to canal boats. They should travel on the new constructed Erie Canal westward. The canal boats did not have the steam engine. They were pulled by horses or mules that went on the towpath along the canal. And they had to stop each 15 miles to change horses or mules, or they had to stop for locks, and they had to stop each evening to find a place to drink, eat, and sleep. It became a drawn-out trip. They became in short of food, in short of drink, and again they became hungry, thirsty, and tired. After 8 days and 8 nights, they came to the canal town Halle. And again, they went ashore with all their stuff. And now they had to walk 9 miles through the wood without path or carrying all this, the children, the chest, and so on. Tired. But they reached Kendall. But what they met in Kendall and how their lives became is another story I'll not tell now. Perhaps next year. I'll just reveal before I stop what happened in New York. Because in New York, Restoration was released and the captain set free with help of the American president himself, John Quincy Adams. Some of the Quakers knew him personally. He listened to them and he believed them. But Lars Kjellane had to remain in New York again, now to sell Restoration and the iron. But time has changed. It wasn't easy to sell the iron and the boat. Especially not the boat. First, in December, he sold the boat and the iron. And he got only $400 for both of them. And they had bought just Restoration for $1,800. Lars Kjellane took the steamer up Hudson River, came to Albany, but that was in December. And the canal had frozen and the boat stopped for the winter. What should he do? 8 days and nights away from his wife, little daughter, and the rest of the immigrants. But Lars Kjellane always found advice. He bought skates and went skating on the frozen canal. 30 miles he went skating. And he reached Halle, and he reached Kendall. He reached his little daughter, Margaret Allen, his wife, and the rest of the immigrant group before Christmas, the year 1825. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Anna Elizabeth. We really enjoyed hearing your story today. I think for me, it's always amazing as a descendant of a slooper to think that people would even know the story of my ancestors. Can I ask, how did you become interested in the history of early Norwegian immigration and the story of the sloopers specifically?
Yes, as a storyteller, I was asked of the foundation, the immigrant ship Restoration, to produce a storytelling script to the guides on board the new built replica of Restoration. And through that work, I become very interested in this topic. And it comes so close to me because it turned out that two of the sloopers is from the municipality where I live now, where I've lived for 37 years. One of them was Johannes Steine, so I feel I know him a bit personally, and his daughter and his son and so on. He was born and grew up here, but also Daniel Rossdale, your anchor store, was born here. Even he went to Tysvær, where he married, but he was born and grew up here. And I myself am from Egersund, and in Egersund, the restoration was owned by one of the ship owner in my hometown, and it was bought there. So it come close to me, even if I think it's a really important part of our national history too. Yeah.
That's amazing to hear your connection with the sloopers, and I'm very excited about that as well. You are obviously a very talented storyteller. How did you become interested in writing and telling stories?
Perhaps the two things I come up in my mind. First of all, my old father. He loved to tell stories from his childhood, and he loved to tell stories from his time as a sailor. And I loved to listen to him. On the other side, I remember when I was 7 years old and started in schools. We were three girls that had long way to go to school. 1 hour we used each morning. And this walking to school, we were telling each other stories and talking. And one day I started to tell a dream. I had dreamt about the two others in the night, and I started to tell this story. And they started to ask me, yes, but what happened then? And I started to answer them, to create a new story. And when we came close to school, they said, oh, can't you tell this in the classroom? We asked the teacher. And so they did. And I started to tell this dream that I also had created to a big story. But when I saw the eyes of the other boys and girls on my age, my own class comrades, I put them into the story too. And they like it. And I like to tell the story. And I remember this moment as something, yes, that the storytelling, that's something that was for me. Yeah, that's the beginning. But later as a teacher, I also had to find back to the storytelling, because when I don't get the attention of the student, I just, without thinking, started to tell them a story and in a way catch them. So it became a way to do my work. And after, I also want to tell that in the middle of the 90s, a subject was established on University 11 called storytelling. And I started on that study. And after I established my own storytelling company, and since I partly had had it as a livelihood.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, you're a very talented storyteller. Thank you. And of course, it's especially difficult to do it in English, but you did that very well. So thank you. One final question, and I think this is very interesting, is as I understand the, well, as we all know, Restoration was eventually sold in New York. And I understand that you and your husband have attempted to locate the final resting place of Restoration. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? And have you been able to find Restoration?
Yes, we wonder what happened to Restoration, and no one could tell us about it. But my husband, that is an historian, once when we were at the Historical Society in New York, he asked for the newspaper. He had done that before, therefore I have read it and therefore I know it. But again, he asked for the newspaper, and for the last part of 1825 and the beginning part of 1826. And we were reading with white gloves the newspaper, and find a couple of sale ads that told that it was for sale. But first in February, we found an ad that said that Restoration, and it was our boat, was going to sail to Caribbean, to St. Thomas, Charlotte Amalia, the main town there, and they had place for some passengers. So we know that it was going to St. Thomas. And in 2014, we went to St. Thomas, and my husband found the archives and a library, and we got a microfilm of the newspapers for 1826 and started to read page for page, both of us looking Restoration. Oh, the first we saw was a lot of ads about slave for sales because St. Thomas, that now is one of the American Virgin Islands, at that time was one of the Danish Norwegian slave colony. But after a time, we found that Restoration again was for sale. And it was, it could be used for sailing among the islands in the Caribbean. It was good for that. There was standing. And after a few hours looking in the newspaper, we found who bought Restoration and who the captain was that would sail the Restoration to St. Croix or St. Croix. I don't know how you say it, but another of them, another of the American Virgin Island that also had been a slave colony of Denmark, Norway. And 2 years later, in 2016, we took a flight to St. Croix. And in the town Fredrikstad, we found the address for the owner of the ship, the street and the number, but we couldn't find any more because all the archives from that time had burned down in a slave revolt. So we just have to imagine. Restoration came to St. Croix, and we can imagine, did it end its days with sailing between the islands that once was slave colony for Denmark, Norway? That's not a good thought, but there is a nice place. But that's what we know, and much feeling around it.
Well, I think that's very interesting that you at least tried to track it down and you found that it did go to the Caribbean anyway and spent some time in St. Thomas and St. Croix. And certainly that was a good excuse to go to St. Croix. I think maybe I'll take you up on that someday as well. Well, thank you, Anna Elizabeth. It was such an honor to be able to hear from you today and for you to be able to tell the story of the sloopers. I've watched all of who have been in attendance, and there have been many comments of people who have appreciated your storytelling as well. And so on behalf of all of us in attendance, thank you very much. It was a wonderful story, and thank you for telling the story of the sloopers. That means a lot to us today. Thank you.
And thank you for being together with you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Chris Johnson at Vesterheim.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. This was fantastic. I'd like to say especially a tremendous thank you to Anna Elizabeth. That was a wonderful performance. It was so special to be able to watch this performance happen live from Norway. And we're so grateful for the story that you shared with us today. I also want to say on behalf of Vesterheim, tusen takk to the Rifilka Museum in Sand, Norway for hosting the performance today. It's nice to have a little bit of a relationship with that museum today. And then finally, I want to say thank you to Kirk for making it possible for Vesterheim to put on this event. This was Kirk's brainchild in a little bit in putting this all together. So I want to thank him for helping in organizing this, and also for inviting the Slooper Society of America to join us and hear this captivating story. So that is just wonderful. Now, just one little bit of housekeeping. Everyone will be receiving a follow-up email tomorrow. And also with that, you'll get the event recording, as well as more information about Vesterheim and the organizations you heard about during today's program. We hope you'll visit each of our websites, follow us on Facebook, or become involved through membership. So with that, I want to say thank you and goodbye to everyone. Ha det bra.
Ha det.
Ha det bra.